A $70,000 truck today can silently cost you $1 million in retirement. Most people never see the true price until it's too late. I'm Charlie, and here we break down the real financial impact of everyday money decisions. Before we dive in, comment below. Would you spend $70,000 on a new truck today? Or invest it for your future? Let's see what most people really think. When most people look at a $70,000 truck, they see a price tag. They see monthly payments, insurance costs, and maybe the resale value a few years down the road. What they do not see is the invisible price. The invisible price is opportunity cost. It is the future value of the capital that is permanently redirected away from compounding and toward consumption. Opportunity cost is not a theoretical concept. It is the foundation of long-term wealth building. Every dollar you spend today has an alternative use. It can be consumed, or it can be invested. When invested, that dollar does not simply grow once. It compounds. It generates returns, and those returns generate their own returns. Over 30 or 40 years, that effect becomes exponential. Small decisions, repeated or made early, scale dramatically over time. The real cost of a $70,000 truck is not $70,000. It is what that $70,000 could have become if it had been invested and allowed to compound for decades. Most people underestimate this because human intuition struggles with exponential growth. We think in straight lines. Wealth grows in curves. Let us examine a realistic scenario. Assume a long-term average return between 8 and 10% per year. That range reflects historical equity market performance over extended periods. At 8% annually, $70,000 grows to roughly $1 million in about 40 years. At 10%, it reaches that milestone even sooner. The majority of that growth does not happen in the early years. It happens in the final decade when the accumulated returns begin compounding on a much larger base. This is where early capital becomes disproportionately powerful. In the first 10 years, growth appears modest. In years 20 through 30, the curve begins to steepen. By years 35 to 40, the portfolio accelerates dramatically. The compounding effect becomes self-reinforcing. That is why the same $70,000 invested at age 35 is radically more valuable than $70,000 invested at age 50. Now consider a practical example. A 35-year-old professional decides to purchase a new truck for $70,000. They could have invested that same amount in a tax-advantaged retirement account, such as a 401(k) or an individual retirement account, allowing it to grow tax-deferred or tax-free depending on the structure. Instead, the capital is converted into a depreciating asset sitting in the driveway. Fast forward to age 65 or 70. If that $70,000 had compounded at an average of 9% over 35 years, it would approach or exceed $1 million. That $1 million is not just a number on a statement. Under a conservative withdrawal strategy of 4% per year, it could generate $40,000 in annual retirement income without depleting principal too quickly. That is the difference between comfort and constraint, between retiring on schedule and working additional years out of necessity. When someone says the truck costs $70,000, they are ignoring that it may cost them $40,000 per year in retirement income decades later. That is the invisible trade-off. Lifestyle upgrades today directly reduce financial flexibility tomorrow. The situation becomes even more pronounced when we account for depreciation. Unlike invested capital, which has the potential to appreciate, vehicles almost always decline in value. A new truck often loses 20% of its value in the first year alone. Within 5 years, it can lose 50 to 60% of its original price. That $70,000 purchase may be worth $35,000 or less halfway through the decade. So, the comparison is not between a $70,000 asset and a $70,000 investment. It is between a rapidly depreciating asset and a compounding one. On one side, you have exponential growth. On the other, guaranteed decline. The financial gap between those two paths widens every single year. Yet people continue to make these decisions, not because they lack intelligence, but because of behavioral finance factors. Lifestyle inflation plays a significant role. As income increases, spending tends to increase in parallel. The raise that could have accelerated investing instead upgrades the vehicle. The bonus that could have funded a retirement account becomes a down payment on a newer model. Status signaling is another powerful force. Vehicles are visible symbols of success. They are parked in driveways, seen by neighbors, noticed by coworkers. Investment accounts are invisible. No one sees a well-funded retirement plan. There is no social reinforcement for compounding quietly in the background. There is immediate validation for driving something impressive. Emotional decision-making also contributes. High earners often justify expensive purchases as deserved rewards for hard work. They tell themselves they will invest more later. They believe future income will compensate for present spending. What they rarely do is calculate the precise long-term trade-off. They do not run the numbers on what that capital would have become over 3 or 4 decades. The result is not immediate financial collapse. It is subtle erosion. Each large consumer purchase chips away at future optionality. Each decision slightly reduces the margin of safety in retirement. Because the consequences are delayed by decades, they feel abstract. The truck is tangible. The $1 million 40 years from now feels hypothetical, even though mathematically it is highly probable under disciplined investing. When we zoom out, the truck becomes a case study. It represents a broader principle. Major consumer purchases are rarely isolated financial events. They are capital allocation decisions. They determine whether money works for you over time or is converted into a lifestyle expense that must be continually replaced. This is where the conversation shifts from a single vehicle to a systemic pattern. The initial $70,000 is only part of the story. There are financing structures, recurring upgrades, maintenance cycles, and insurance costs that compound the drag on long-term wealth. The hidden retirement trade-offs do not stop at the sticker price. They expand through a chain of related decisions that magnify the impact over an entire career. That broader pattern is what ultimately determines whether a $70,000 truck remains a manageable expense or quietly evolves into a 7-figure retirement gap. The hidden cost of the truck does not end with opportunity cost. In reality, most $70,000 trucks are not purchased with cash. They are financed. That introduces another layer of financial drag that compounds quietly in the background. When a vehicle is financed over 5, 6, or 7 years, interest becomes part of the equation. Even at moderate auto loan rates, the buyer pays thousands of dollars beyond the sticker price. The $70,000 truck may require monthly payments that total $80,000 or more by the time the loan is satisfied. That additional $10,000 is pure financing cost. It produces no asset growth. It simply compensates the lender for access to capital. Then there are insurance premiums. Higher value vehicles require higher coverage. Over several years, insurance alone can add many thousands of dollars. Fuel consumption for large trucks is typically higher than smaller vehicles. Maintenance, repairs, tires, registration fees, and property taxes in certain states further increase the lifetime expense. None of these costs are optional. They are embedded in ownership. When you aggregate these factors, the real out-of-pocket cost of the $70,000 truck can easily approach $90,000 to $110,000 over its useful life. That figure excludes the opportunity cost we already examined. It is strictly the cash flow reality. Now consider an alternative scenario. Instead of allocating $1,000 or more per month toward a truck payment and associated costs, that same amount is invested consistently in a diversified portfolio earning an average long-term return. Over 5 to 7 years, those contributions accumulate. But the real impact appears over decades. If $1,000 per month were invested for 30 years at an average return of 8 to 9%, it would grow into well over $1 million. The numbers are not extreme. They are mechanical. The contrast becomes sharper when we examine behavior over an entire career. Many consumers do not purchase one truck and drive it for 20 years. They upgrade every 5 to 7 years. Each cycle resets the financing clock. Each trade-in locks in depreciation and initiates a new round of interest payments and elevated insurance premiums. Imagine 3 or 4 high-end truck purchases between ages 30 and 60. Each purchase carries not only its own opportunity cost, but its own financing and operating costs. The cumulative capital redirected away from investment could exceed $300,000 in nominal spending. When compounded over decades, that diversion can represent several $1 million in foregone retirement value. This is the multiplier effect of recurring upgrades. The decision is not isolated. It becomes a pattern that steadily absorbs surplus cash flow that could have been invested. Over 30 years, the difference between upgrading every 6 years and driving reliable vehicles for longer periods can determine whether someone reaches financial independence at 55 or continues working into their late 60s. Retirement math makes this distinction tangible. An additional $1 million in an investment portfolio is not abstract wealth. Under a conservative withdrawal approach of 4% annually, that portfolio could generate $40,000 per year in sustainable income. At 5%, it approaches $50,000 annually. That is the equivalent of replacing a middle-class salary without depleting principal too rapidly. Viewed through that lens, the truck is no longer a consumer choice alone. It becomes a trade-off between present lifestyle and future autonomy. One path may require working 5 to 10 additional years. The other may allow optional retirement earlier, part-time work, or career flexibility. The gap is not measured in horsepower. It is measured in years of freedom. Inflation and rising lifestyle expectations intensify the issue. As incomes grow, fixed costs often grow alongside them. A larger home, a more expensive vehicle, higher recurring payments. These fixed obligations reduce the percentage of income available for investing. Wealth accumulation is rarely about headline income. It is about surplus, the consistent gap between what you earn and what you spend. High fixed costs compress that surplus. When monthly obligations are elevated, investing becomes reactive rather than proactive. Contributions fluctuate, market downturns feel more threatening, career risks feel less tolerable. Financial flexibility narrows because the margin for error is smaller. By contrast, individuals who maintain controlled fixed costs retain a higher savings rate. A higher savings rate accelerates compounding. It reduces reliance on exceptional investment returns. It creates resilience during economic downturns. Over time, this discipline compounds just as powerfully as the investment returns themselves. It is important to clarify that this analysis is not an argument against spending or against owning a truck. It is an argument for intentional capital allocation. If someone has already secured their retirement trajectory, maintains a high savings rate, and understands the trade-offs, then the purchase may align with their broader plan. The problem arises when the decision is made without evaluating long-term consequences. Most people do not frame the purchase as a capital allocation decision. They frame it as a monthly payment decision. If the payment fits within current cash flow, the purchase feels justified. But monthly affordability does not equal long-term sustainability. The relevant question is not whether you can afford the payment today. It is whether you are willing to exchange decades of compounded growth for the benefit received. That shift in perspective changes the conversation. Instead of asking, "Can I afford this truck?" the more precise question becomes, "What future am I trading for this truck?" At this point, the discussion moves beyond warning and into strategy. The objective is not deprivation, it is alignment. The goal is to build a framework for evaluating major purchases in a way that balances enjoyment today with security tomorrow. That requires structured thinking, explicit calculations, and a clear understanding of personal priorities. The next step is to examine how to make those decisions deliberately, how to quantify trade-offs before committing capital, and how to ensure that lifestyle choices support rather than undermine long-term wealth building. The deeper lesson in all of this is not about trucks. It is about capital allocation discipline. Every dollar you earn has two possible futures. It can be consumed or it can compound. Once that dollar is spent on a depreciating asset, its compounding potential is permanently interrupted. Once it is invested, it begins working independently of your labor. The truck example functions as a case study. It illustrates how a single decision, when examined over a multi-decade horizon, carries consequences far beyond its surface price. This is not an argument for extreme frugality or deprivation. It is an argument for clarity. When you understand the long-term trajectory of your capital, you make decisions with a different level of awareness. The first practical step is to implement a structured decision framework before making any major purchase. Instead of asking whether something is affordable in monthly terms, calculate its future value if invested. Project what the purchase price could become over 20, 30, or 40 years at a reasonable rate of return. This transforms an emotional decision into a numerical one. Next, evaluate the percentage of your net worth being allocated. A $70,000 purchase has a very different impact on someone with a $5 million net worth than it does on someone with $200,000 invested. Context matters. The same expense can either be marginal or destabilizing depending on scale. Then assess whether the purchase delays key financial milestones. Does it slow down debt elimination? Does it reduce retirement contributions below optimal levels? Does it extend the timeline to financial independence by several years? These are measurable questions. They can be answered with basic projections and honest assumptions. This framework does not eliminate spending. It ensures alignment. If after running the numbers you still decide the purchase aligns with your priorities and does not compromise long-term security, then the decision is informed rather than impulsive. The objective is not perfection, it is intentionality. To understand the power of modest adjustments, consider a comparative scenario. Instead of purchasing a brand new $70,000 truck, imagine buying a reliable used vehicle for $35,000. The difference, $35,000, is invested immediately. If that amount compounds at 9% over 35 years, it alone can grow to several $100,000. If the monthly payment difference is also invested consistently, the long-term impact expands further. Layer in tax-advantaged accounts and employer matching contributions. When investment dollars are placed inside retirement structures that defer or eliminate taxes on growth, compounding accelerates. An employer match effectively provides an immediate return on contribution. Over decades, these structural advantages create asymmetric outcomes. Small early differences widen into substantial gaps. This is how modest lifestyle adjustments create disproportionate results. It is rarely a single dramatic sacrifice. It is a series of disciplined reallocations. Choosing the used vehicle, extending ownership from 5 years to 10, redirecting bonuses into investments rather than upgrades. Each decision alone may appear minor. Collectively, they reshape the trajectory of wealth accumulation. At the same time, psychological balance is essential. Money is not meant to be hoarded without purpose. Enjoyment matters, experiences matter, comfort matters. The objective is not to eliminate satisfaction today in pursuit of a distant future. It is to avoid decisions that permanently reduce optionality. Optionality is one of the most valuable byproducts of wealth. It is the ability to change careers without panic, to step back from a stressful role, to support family members when needed, to retire on your own terms rather than because of health or external pressure. These forms of freedom are funded by accumulated capital. When spending choices consistently undermine savings capacity, optionality erodes. High fixed costs lock individuals into continued income dependence. Investment balances grow slowly. Market downturns become more threatening. Career dissatisfaction becomes harder to address because financial flexibility is limited. Conversely, when capital is consistently directed toward assets rather than liabilities, optionality expands. The investment portfolio grows quietly in the background. The compounding curve steepens over time. The sense of urgency around income begins to decline. Decisions become less reactive and more strategic. The compounding lesson must be reinforced clearly. Large consumer purchases are rarely isolated events. They influence savings rates. They shape monthly cash flow. They determine how much capital is available for investing year after year. They alter the timeline to retirement. When repeated, they establish patterns that either accelerate or hinder financial independence. Financial independence is not built through a single extraordinary investment. It is built through repeated capital allocation choices. Each year, each bonus, each major purchase decision either strengthens or weakens the compounding engine. Over decades, these incremental differences create outcomes that appear dramatic, but are rooted in ordinary choices. Understanding opportunity cost changes behavior. Calculating lifetime impact before lifestyle upgrades introduces discipline. Prioritizing assets over depreciating liabilities creates momentum. Aligning major purchases with long-term retirement goals ensures that enjoyment today does not undermine security tomorrow. A $70,000 truck is not inherently reckless, but without deliberate analysis, it can unintentionally represent a seven-figure retirement trade-off. The numbers are not exaggerated. They are the natural consequence of time and compounding. In the end, wealth building is less about income level and more about direction. It is about deciding whether your capital will serve your future self or satisfy your present impulses. When you consistently choose compounding over consumption in the decisions that matter most, the long-term outcome becomes predictable. That is the real cost calculation, not what something costs today, but what it prevents tomorrow. If you found this breakdown valuable, hit the like button. It helps the channel keep producing content that actually teaches real financial principles. Subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss strategies that can protect your wealth and accelerate your path to financial independence. And remember, every dollar you spend today has a future. Make sure it's working for you, not against you.